Hello, we are live with the last session of Reclaim Open, and I'm here with Mark Corbett Wilson. Thank you for putting a bow on the conference here. So, you want to explain what your session is and what we're doing?
And thank you and everybody at Reclaim for the conference and for letting me put the bow or the cherry on top. This is the last session. I had an idea about talking to a couple of folks about improvising the future of digital storytelling. And then I submitted months ago. I can't even remember whenever we did that. And then you all put the schedule together. And it turns out that one of them is in Brazil at a conference and the other one is in his class. So I recorded some interviews or whatever I recorded with them. And then I thought I had an hour, and then it turns out we have half an hour. And then I chopped it down to almost half an hour, and grabbed a couple pictures of them presenting. And so we'll see if that works. But hopefully we'll have their pictures. And I had intended to have a dialogue with 3 people, but instead we have a dialogue with 2 people and 2 audio files. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to jump right into it then.
Well, I guess I should introduce our guests.
Okay.
First up will be Brian Alexander, a longtime digital storyteller, currently a new media type professor of in graduate school at Georgetown University. That was confusing. And second up will be Joe Lambert, one of the creators of digital storytelling. And I forget what the original place was called, but then there was a Center for Digital Storytelling, but now it's called storycenter.org. And so I had hoped to put them together at the Reclaim summer camp last summer. I put Jim Groom and Joe Lambert together for the first time. It was surprising. Now, I know that Joe Lambert and Brian Alexander have met before, but that was the intention, was to put them together and talk about the future of digital storytelling.
Amazing. I think I'm situated to play the audio files here. So we ready to start then?
Absolutely. Here we go.
Okay. Give me one more second. Said that, said I was situated.
And I should say I sprung all this on Taylor. He was my minder. And then I said, hey, Taylor, here's what we're going to do. And then here we are. And it all just came together in the last 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. So the way I've decided to do this is by sharing tab audio. So we are going to look at a big blank screen, but that's okay. Let me just, hopefully this works here.
And whenever we think about the future, it's always important to think about things in the past and the present that are continuing. And so we should mention a few of those. So the classic story center model of roughly 3-minute autobiographical or biographical video, I think will continue. The tools for it keep getting easier and easier. There are plenty of apps for mobile phones to be able to do that, and so I think we'll keep seeing that. It's still a kind of almost underground thing. It doesn't get a lot of publicity, but you run into it. The Story Center YouTube channel has a lot of good examples, and I think we'll keep seeing that. I think what I used to call, and Alan Levine and I wrote an article about this, Web 2.0 storytelling, we just now call social media storytelling, just continues to be immense, and that's people using all kinds of social media technologies, social media broadly understood, to tell stories. So that's everything from video, such as YouTube and TikTok, to audio, of course, with podcasting. And when I'm saying podcasting, it's important to think of the full range of that, because you've got professional, top line, highly produced stuff like, Joe Rogan or NPR. But there's also, and I think more importantly, a big wave of just, DIY people, doing podcasting from scratch. There are other social media platforms that people use, and sometimes they don't know they're doing digital storytelling, but they effectively are. So you think about Facebook, you can even think about LinkedIn, and people just using the platform to share some story. And the story might be fictional, it might be non-fictional, it might be a blend often, but we'll keep seeing all of that. We're also seeing more story-specific applications, especially for mobile devices. So we'll keep seeing that. And then, what gets more publicity and is very important is seeing more uses of AI. So partly that's AI to produce stuff for stories, so to produce images, to help produce text for whatever purpose, be it captions, be it a voiceover or a script. And we're also seeing, I think, AI being used for helping tell stories, just as a collaborator, as a partner, and of course to produce audio and video content as well. I don't know to what extent we're going to see what the British press calls the techlash play out against digital storytelling. That is the rising tide of criticism, opposition, anti-hype, and just sheer anxiety and uncomfortableness with digital technology. There's some early signs that total social media use is ticking down. I'm not convinced by it completely yet, but there are some signs of that. So will we see, for example, fewer cases of people using social media to tell stories? Digital video, to me, seems invincible right now. People love producing and consuming it through whatever means necessary. Professional streaming video services, like Netflix, as well as YouTube and TikTok. So we'll probably keep seeing that. There's been talk of a podcast bubble, but the field just seems immense right now. Not as big as video, but still very, very healthy. So we have lots of people making all kinds of stories in digital audio. So I think we'll keep seeing that. Now, one aspect of digital storytelling that doesn't get enough love, I think, is the nature of stories in games. And I think specifically, if we're talking about digital storytelling, this means digital games. And, there's a long history, actually, going back to the 90s of people arguing about how this plays out. But I think it's pretty clear that a lot of video game producers like to include story in different levels, different ways, in order to make their games richer and more appealing in what is a very, very competitive marketplace. And we're also seeing a lot of DIY game-based storytelling. There's a great platform called itch.io, where people upload just any game item that they've made. And some of it is terrible, some of it is lovely, it all depends. But I think, the unique properties of gaming for storytelling are still being explored. How do you, for example, handle the idea of multi-dimensional storytelling where people can make lots of choices and go in different directions? The classic avatar for this is choose your own adventures. To what extent instead do you have what's usually called a game on rails, where it looks like you have choices, but you really keep proceeding through the same more or less linear narrative? And one more thing to think about, which has been slower to grow than I was hoping, but is still chugging along, is digital storytelling with XR. And so if listeners aren't familiar with the term, that's a combination of VR and AR. If you're not familiar with those terms, just to explain, VR, virtual reality, is the use of digital technology to create a virtual world that people can inhabit. And so you think about people putting on a headpiece and exploring a virtual world, such as a game or a space or a time. AR is augmented reality, which is the exact reverse. That's when you take digital content and you pin it to the physical world. And I'm pretty sure almost everybody's experienced this. If you've ever used Google Maps when you're driving or walking, that's an example of that. You think about games like Pokemon Go, that's another example of that. So XR is a combination of these intertwining of the physical and virtual worlds. And there are a bunch of different tools that do this in different ways. Right now, the Ray-Ban Meta glasses are pretty popular. Meta keeps producing its own headsets. Apple did a swing and a miss with their Vision Pro, which they might try again. But there's all kinds of interesting storytelling possibilities with that. You get the interesting challenge of how do you have a person go through a 360-degree field. So, if you're looking at a video, you're looking at this narrow screen. It's rich, all kinds of things happen in it, but it's still what you're seeing directly in front of you. But if you're in a 360-degree field, how do you handle creating a space and an environment for people to explore that? There's some really interesting work in trying to come up with the grammar of a story for that. Plus, how do you tell a story that is overlaid on the real world? So Pokemon Go did that. I was a big fan of the game Zombies Run, which is a form of that. I'm happy to say more about this. In fact, in LA, there was an augmented reality story. I'm going to get the title wrong. The title was Latitude and Longitude of a city block in LA. And basically, this was before the iPhone came out. You would go to this block and you would have a kludged together combination of a flip phone with tablet computer, and you walk around this block, and depending on where you were, different parts of digital content would download for you and give you a different part of the story. So I think with all of these, I think there's just a lot of exploration, a lot of creativity going on.
Yeah, and at the time the World Series was going on, and I pointed out there's a new place in LA where the seats are down into a 180-degree screen, and they were showing the World Series where you're actually kind of sitting on the field. So, but go ahead and roll Joe's clip. All the clips are shorter for the people who think that 7 3/4 minutes is too long.
Okay. Full transparency, I think I got a way to do this that I can actually show the image at the same time. So
I knew you'd figure it out.
Yeah. So let me know if you can hear this. Give me a thumbs up or down. It's playing. Not yet. Why is it not playing yet? Oh my gosh. Come on. Hold on. We're getting there. You hear that? Okay, old method. It's fine. We'll go with that.
I explained in the chat we're doing this on the fly, so hopefully they'll forgive us. It'll make a perfectly fine podcast. Oh, the sleepy nomad. I thought you would be asleep by now.
This word, I'll start with this word digital storytelling could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. If you Google it, if you go to Wikipedia, it will reference primarily a practice that grew out of the organization I started, Story Center. What the essence of that practice is a workshop-based model that takes X number of hours in person, let's say 21 hours, and it's a step-by-step process that focuses on getting people to make a short film that's 2 to 4 minutes long based on a narrated script that's worked on in the workshop process of 250 to 350 words. And the output of that, is made into the film through a digital video editor. Are there other kinds of digital storytelling? Yes, there are. There always has been, really. And the word did not brand completely to the Story Center method, but the method has, because of its systematic methodology, it went to the rest of the planet as a type of participatory media practice that was useful in countless human endeavor environments. The work that Story Center did was as often as not training people to do what we do. And then we also did it, and we did it with institutions large and small. on a planetary basis for 30 years that gave us all sorts of new ideas about what we could do and how we could do it. In the example of, moving from a desktop, laptop environment to even the use of mobile devices, we did a lot of things just that were about mobility. We also began to play with new possibilities of distribution, such as place-based distribution using geographic information systems that could place media inside a context, like working with the story maps function of the Esri companies, GIS, kind of do-it-yourself systems. Were there countless other intersections? One was with oral history, one was with photography. Those participatory mechanisms like photo voice, or what the Museum of the Person does in Brazil, which they call social memory technology, those things we also stole from them. We stole from StoryCorps. We stole for in-person processes like the Moth. We stole, and we were there before them as well. We were doing those things before they were doing them. So all of that is under some big bucket that I call story work. Story work I distinguish from digital storytelling, because story work is any number of things that may or not even have an artifact. Sitting in a room, listening to each other, sharing stories, and being very good at facilitating that, almost as good as a group therapy expert with hundreds of hours of training in group therapy. That's a kind of story work. Do we have a lot of people that do just that? Yes. So that's there. What we're seeing, obviously, is any number of the things we can do can be aided by technologies that come down the pike. So yes, when a 360 camera and VR goggles came along, we wanted to do workshops with 360 cameras, and you watched them all in VR, and it was fun. We did that. They come, they go. We're sure there are going to be more things coming and going that would change some aspect of what we're doing. But I think, like, in some ways, the metaphor I would use is we created a yoga practice. Are there many different kinds of yogas? Yes, there are. We created one, just like somebody who's a yogi created, and you go to those schools to learn that style, and you do it that way. And they'll still be doing it that way 100 years from now or 200 years from now. And I think our form of digital storytelling will be like that. People will say, yeah, I could do a lot of different things, but this little tight little model kind of works every time. It does something very special. And the hope is for us is that we'll innovate as actively as we have going forward. All of that's going to be situated in the context of the work. And the United States is just one context of the work. So we're also stealing from all our wonderful colleagues in Canada and Australia and Europe and South Asia and Africa and all the places where there's a lot of this work going on, and people are doing a good job of articulating a refinement in the practice and a use case in the practice that can inform our evolution. And I'm an old timer now, and I'm still like, what else can I do? What would be cool if we could do this with that? How would that work? And I always want to, be part of that discussion.
Awesome.
So people tell me I spend too much time laying the groundwork or whatever, showing the field, but here we are. And now, they both reached the future in their opening gambit.
Should I go to the next one?
Go ahead. Yeah, we'll just
Agency, or telling your story using all this stuff, taking it away from technology.
Yeah. I think the story center, which used to be Center for Digital Storytelling, model of autobiographical storytelling is very, very powerful. I've done workshops on this, written a book partially about that. I'm a big fan of that. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's a subset of story. Right? I mean, autobiographical story is not the whole world of story. And I think there is a whole world of agency where people can tell stories that are not autobiographical. It's an artificial distinction, if someone wants to tell a story.
Yeah, see, I was going to say that. I didn't mean it in that narrow sense.
But I do want to separate these out, because I used to do workshops for academics, and part of the time the academics would want to tell a story that was personal. It would be how they came to America, or it'd be about their some part of their personal self-discovery. And then other times they would want to tell stories about their field. So I had a great one from a chemist who did a video about lipid separation. Had a political scientist who did one about South African politics. Had a IT department got really creative and created a 5-minute story about a bad student who made all the mistakes that they could think of for handling campus IT. And we could blur the line a little bit. The prof who's doing lipids is obviously passionate about that. So, and one of the great things about that video is you could hear his voice and the excitement in it. The IT people who are doing this story, it's obviously it's part of their lives. But I think you can make a pretty quick and dirty separation from the site. There's autobiographical story and not. I think when it comes to AI, in a sense, it operates like other technologies. So we think digital photography helps us deal with the visual, first of all, the physical artifacts of photography, printed photographs, Polaroids, and so on that we may have, from a century of that. And digital photography lets you scan and edit and enhance and so on, and that can be very, very useful for a story. You could think as well about other digital visual tools that may create stuff that you need. So one of the things I love doing in stories is having people use Google Earth or Google Maps to create a map of where the story, here's where I was born, that kind of thing. But also to draw stuff that doesn't exist, that they can't get. So a memory of their house is gone. They can't find any photos of it, so they can sketch it out, that kind of thing. And I think AI can play a lot of roles like that. You can have an AI create a human voice if you want for a character that you can't otherwise voice. I'll do a story about a bully I remember in elementary school. Well, I can't do that voice myself. I don't want to. Have the AI generate it. Having the AI help you with spots in writing. So if you're doing audio, if you're doing a complete script, having it help you with formatting, having it help you when you're stuck, but also giving you feedback. I mean, it's one of the things I love about Notebook LM. Our mutual friend Tom Hames is a big fan of that. And you go on this, thinking about images being created. So I think AI definitely has a big potential role for different storytellers, but not for everybody. AI is right now, as we record this, extremely controversial. It may be that if you show, say, a video with AI art in it, that some of the audience will be repelled and take them right out of the magic of story. It may be that some storytellers in a workshop just refuse to use it because they think the technology is too problematic, and so they have to use something else. But I think it has all kinds of possibilities.
Controversial area. And there's been a lot of pushback.
Well, it depends on who we are and who's talking about this. I mean, one of the things I found, again, this is developing quickly, and there are all kinds of ways it could develop further. I mean, not just the technology itself, obviously, but also the way we apprehend it and respond to it culturally. So I mean, there's already a bit of a culture war over this, where you've got a lot of leading conservatives thinking about President Trump or Project 2025, which are very pro AI, and a lot of the opposition to AI comes from a very progressive space, focusing on bias and prejudice and labor issues and environmental issues. So it may be that this becomes, truly divisive, and that using AI for storytelling is like, maybe not having a MAGA hat, but it might be, having a big pickup truck with a Punisher logo on it, and it may be that divisive. I'm putting this conditionally because there's so many ways this could go. But the other thing is that it's in a sense, it's hard to get away from AI. I mean, because you could say, well, there are certain tools we can turn to and fire up, like Midjourney, and then we could choose not to use them. Fine, but we have generative AI built into so many other tools right now, from Canva to Google Search and Google Docs. So it's getting harder and harder to try to have a purely non-AI place for this. But I would recommend that any facilitator or teacher who is teaching digital storytelling to talk to their population and see what they think. They have adults or kids or whomever, to ask them, what do you think about using AI? And this isn't just AI. If you want to ask, give them other tools to say, all right, well, using Facebook or Instagram, well, some might be very anti-Meta or anti-Zuckerberg. Telling a story on X, formerly known as Twitter, so it might be very anti-Elon Musk and so on. So I wouldn't want to force this on anybody. There's an echo of that. You mentioned the public domain, and I've always had this practice of talking about copyright with my classes and giving them a choice. And saying, quick and dirty explanation of copyright law and how making a digital storytelling can expose you to charges of copyright infringement. So Mark and I want to do a story about our different experiences of Hollywood, and so we want to have a song. So I'll pick up "Hooray for Hollywood." Well, if we're just teaching this in the class, if we're just doing it for our own benefit, I don't mind. But you have to tell people, well, look, here's the way copyright law works. And if you want to post this to YouTube or to Instagram or to Flickr or to TikTok, well, you're opening yourself up to these charges, and here are your choices. And I love to give my classes all kinds of options for public domain materials, for searching for Creative Commons materials. But also, a thing I really love, and the Story Center guys are all about this, is having people in the class make stuff. So, you'll probably have somebody who has a nice voice for radio to have them, redo some voiceovers. Someone might be, really good at playing music of some kind, singing or guitar. So to have them do it and making your own stuff is, among other things, a great way to assert intellectual property over it. So I'm used to opening up that kind of controversy, and not all teachers will do that. I have a couple of good friends who are like, copyright must be destroyed. It's a terrible regime, and so fight the man, and they'll teach that way. And I have others who will say, I don't want my students to get sued, so they'll teach them very strict copyright. And people have professional reasons for doing this. If you're a librarian, for example, this may impact you in certain ways.
And AI is a way around copyright.
Well, for now,
Yeah.
there, as I keep boring you and other people by saying, there are a whole bunch of lawsuits about copyright and AI. And the only decisive one really wasn't about copyright. The only decisive one was against Anthropic, finding that they used, not that they used copyrighted material, that wasn't the main point, but that they used explicitly pirated content of copyrighted material. So the piracy was the specific nail upon which to hang the judgment. Oh, Aaron Schwartz, you mean? Yeah.
Aaron Schwartz, right.
Yeah, it's a very, very tragic and sad story. But I find a lot of the opposition to AI now actually turns in the opposite direction. Excuse me. It'll say, where it'll charge companies like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, etc., with violating copyright and infringing on the copyright of users. And this argument will call on us to oppose AI in order to protect intellectual property, which I find fascinating to see. Just so it seems like we have both schools of thought in play here. And I'm involved in both schools of thought. I mean, I'm a published author, so I've made a lot of intellectual property, but also I'm a big fan of the Creative Commons and of open content. So I'm happy to explore that. But again, that comes back to individual people.
We lost most of our in-person workshop business, right? And like significantly. And even when I've tried to put on workshops, you were part of one out here that went pretty well, but a lot of them haven't gone on well. Post the pandemic and everybody jumping on Zoom, people haven't like felt, I really don't, if I don't have to travel, I won't. And yet, I think you're going to have more and more people saying, oh, I could be on Zoom anytime. Let me go have an experience that has a resetting of time. So I can imagine digital storytelling workshops in person having aspects that are absolutely somatic, people in the room connecting to each other, talking to each other, maybe massaging shoulders. I don't know, the borders there, but I think people need that. And again, many of the audiences for this, I assume, are people in educational environments where there's a classroom, and most people are still doing classrooms. But when I think about digital storytelling as a retreat experience, I think that business will expand, not contract, in the next 2 years. I think people will say, please, let me go somewhere and be with people and experience them, not just in the story process, but in all the informal in-between spaces, having dinner, hanging out at night and talking. I think most digital storytelling is local, and frankly, a large amount of it is the kind of stuff funded for people that are across the class divide, and that's why it gets funded, like the work I just did in Lawrence, Kansas, with the homeless response team of the county and city agencies that support homeless people. These were all peer leaders. These were all people most definitely from the working class and the marginal working class at that. And I think that kind of work will happen anyway. And to be frank, Mark, a lot of the work that we did with highly vulnerable populations, we refused to do online. Because you couldn't be there with somebody as they flip out. You just couldn't. And you need to be there with them to help them not flip out by giving them all sorts of support. And you need them to feel as safe as possible. And I don't think online environments, for a lot of working people, it doesn't work. I mean, one is their house has shitty bandwidth, and there are people they can't talk about personal stories in their house. It's not safe, So when I say we went mainly online, we went mainly online with the kind of broad work that we do, like with educators who are, just learning a methodology and taking it into their classroom or wherever they're doing it. I think sort of begs the question, how much Story Center could, in its business model, had the ability to always be working with the people we wanted to work with. And the fact of the matter is, it wasn't easy to sustain something. There weren't that many grants. And do we think there's a lot less federal money in the next 2 years for the kind of good work we did? It seemed to me that pretty much the sectors that have been assaulted are all the ones we work with, including USAID and Department of Education, all these people. It's like they would be funding us to do this stuff to reach people that wouldn't be reached anyway. Now they ain't. And states and cities and private foundations are not going to make up the profound loss of resource, even for the most basic and critical infrastructural support for working and marginalized people. Yeah, all of that is horrendous. We now are scaled with a lot more people with the capacity to do Zoom work, right? To do online education work, et cetera, et cetera. We haven't necessarily figured out, kind of optimizing experience through these things, whether that's a online class or the kind of thing we do, you know, as kind of creative workshop space. Could we do more to make things feel more touchy-feely, you know, connected? Yeah, and yet I even see it with our online stuff. It's no matter how you do it, there's a little bit less of an impact, kind of oomph. It's like you miss a class online is different than not showing up at school, or, you know, not showing up for the workshop that you spent money on. I think people have a different sense of what the benefit of the in-person experience is. And again, I would hope, you know, in the countless kind of processes, I think of like fellowship processes or these leadership training thing, you know, people getting money from a foundation or something to have a group of people go through an experience. We've had a lot of those kinds of things. I think they're still going to say, let's bring people into the room, you know, even if it costs money, even if it's more money, because the residual impact will be more, you know, transformative. And ideally, what we're doing is a kind of transformation process that hits people at a, you know, fundamental level, and they walk away feeling, you know, like it was as good as 6 months worth of therapy, which a lot of people have told me that's the way they felt about a workshop process. They don't say it as often with the online stuff. They just simply don't. And so it begs the question of whether we're going to see equal reaction, that people will go out of their way to go into retreat because they frankly need retreats. I mean, it's a mad world out there. We're doing this in the middle of ascendant fascism in the United States. So all of this has got to have some sort of psychological impact.
Just to keep going and develop as more people tune into the ways of using digital technologies to tell stories, and we'll keep seeing them. So just in terms of quantity, I think we should see more, as well as quality. I don't mean good or bad. I just mean the different types of stories. So we might see, I mean, if you spend a lot of time on TikTok, you can see various styles of presentation beginning to appear. If you take a look at, for example, tabletop games, you know, cardboard and plastic, increasingly they use a digital component with it. So you might have a mobile app that gives you, you know, sound effects. You might have another app which handles, you know, processing, crunching data, and so on. And that's another way of telling stories. So I think we'll see both a quantitative and a qualitative increase in digital storytelling. Is I have to make a video for my new book, Peak Higher Education, which is due out from Johns Hopkins University Press in a couple of months. And I have to make basically a trailer for it. And so I will be bringing to bear all kinds of digital storytelling skills in order to, well, quite literally tell the story of the book. And I may spin off from that and make several other videos, which may include other forms of digital storytelling for that book. I do a lot of professional speaking, both in person and virtually, and I always try to use digital storytelling skills in that. So if I've got a Google Slides or PowerPoint presentation, I try to use everything I know about storytelling to make that live and exciting and engaging, and not just a passive click here for the next bullet point. And you know, in person, I try always to return to micro stories and to ways of engaging story. I mean, one thing that is so crucial, one key insight about digital storytelling, is the stories are like Soylent Green. They're inherently made of people. And it's really important, especially in academia, to return to the person as a character. And that's something we struggle with in a lot of ways. And it's a general problem in communication. And this is an issue in climate change, for example, trying to communicate the urgency of climate change, in part because the subject is systematic and abstract, and it's harder to focus on individual character. So I think, you know, I'll continue to do that, to find characters, fictional or non-fictional, to anchor the story of what I'm presenting.
The 12th International Digital Storytelling Conference will be taking place in Sao Paulo, Brazil on November 6th through 8th. So all of us are going down a little bit before. And then several of us are flying up to Belém, Brazil, where the COP30 International Climate Conference will be taking place. Not so much to be part of the policy walks that are showing up from every country on the planet, except maybe the United States, but to be part of the cultural and activist activities that will be happening around that conference to sort of hopefully, remind people that climate issues are vital, and that the Amazon, as the lungs of the world, is a particularly vulnerable part of global climate concern. So we'll be in that discussion next week. And our hope is that we come back, invigorated by learning from examples of amazing practice that take place in the global South, and in this case in Latin America, of which the conference that we're part of will be majority Portuguese-speaking Brazilians, but it will include people from throughout the Spanish-speaking Latin American world, as well as a lot of characters from the global north, like myself. You can find out about it at dst2025.org.
And there we are. Thank you, Taylor. I saw you working away there, getting the visuals, getting the whatever that thing's called. Excellent. You're muted.
Thank you. Thanks for bearing with me, everybody watching this or listening to this later, and we made it happen. But thank you for bringing these fantastic conversations especially to cap off the conference.
Yeah, and I just want to thank everybody at Reclaim for putting together this experimental conference. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of confusion. And I want to shout out to the group of DS106ers and our hashtag WildDS106 on Mastodon and other places. We threw up a website and we aggregated all of our posts and our toots and everything else at combobulating.net. And that will stay up, just like this Reclaim Open site will stay up. And I hope the conversation continues.
Absolutely. All right. And with that, I think we'll sign off. Thanks, everybody.
Nom nom nom.